Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld, and I have a guest today that will be speaking at the 8th Design Ops Summit, taking place September 23rd through 25th, virtually. Ignacio Martinez, welcome to the Rosenfeld Review.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you here, too. I'm looking forward to what you're going to be talking about. The title of your talk is Fair and Effective Designer Evaluation, and that's a very loaded concept in times like these, because I got to think that there's some connection between evaluation and the broader context of not only what designers are being asked to do now, which is changing, but also the economic backdrop of what we are or not fairly expecting from our designers. But before we jump into that, I should mention that you're an associate director at Grand Studio in Chicago, which I think is pretty cool. I know someone there, Diana Dybel, one of our authors of Conversations with Things.
Yeah, I think she's great. She's been my career manager for a while now. I've known her for my 6 years here at Grand Studio, so we've been on projects together, and she's helped me out a lot.
Wait a minute. So she's evaluating you as a designer?
Actually, yeah, that's a funny thing. Yeah, she's the one that evaluates me.
So not only is it a small world, but it's a very meta world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't make that connection. But I always like what Diana has to say. So, it'd be nice to hear maybe related ideas from someone she's influenced, and I imagine vice versa. Well, let's jump into the topic. Again, this is what you're going to be talking about at the Design Ops Summit: fair and effective designer evaluation. First of all, so you kind of told me that you got your degree from the Institute of Design at the IIT in Chicago on like you felt you got it on a Saturday, and you probably celebrated Saturday night, slept in Sunday, and then you went right to work on Monday at Grand Studio. And was this on your mind from the very get go? Was this concept of evaluate? How did it come to you? Were you did it sort of sneak up on you, or were you thinking very directly about it from the get go?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say maybe it snuck up on me. I never really thought about being in this space really. When I'm thinking about design and where I'd be going afterwards after ID, it was more about doing the design. So whether it's UX strategy, getting really into the meat of all that. What got me into sort of this role and kind of the topic that I'll be talking about is more so just our structure here at Grand Studio, where we're fairly small agency, but we're all designers, but at the same time, we're also taking responsibility of different operations that is going on. So, we take it upon ourselves to question, how are we, doing things when it comes to like outside of the projects that we're on, and one of those things was evaluating designers, right? So, when I came on, the way that we evaluate designers was really like a sheet of paper with a couple of traits that each person within the project that worked with that person, we'd rate each other. You're a 3 or a 4 or whatever, and that's kind of like the way that we kept progress uh, in terms of evaluating designers. So then we decided to revamp that and think of a different way.
So, like, were you literally on a piece of paper and a few things, and from the like early on, but now you've moved to something a bit more? Would you say it's like more elaborate or more systematized?
It's definitely more elaborate, yeah. And we've gone through a couple of iterations too from that. I think the sort of spirit of that first iteration, that concept that I was talking about, is still sort of there. It's just a little bit more systematized and trying to make it just more fair and effective for across the designers, and just more transparent as well. Just so that we all trust it, we all know what's going on sort of behind the scenes, and we know like why someone goes from like one level to the next level kind of thing, and what the expectations there.
What was there some sort of event? If I can dig into maybe not the happiest history, like did it blow up, and that's why there was a move to making it more consistent and more transparent. I don't know if you can get into it, but was it just sort of like, oh, consensus is we could do better in this area. Let's do better.
Yeah, no, thankfully there wasn't an event, no, that or anything, any kind of like blow up. I think it was more, as we started to mature a little bit, right? So, when I joined 6 years ago, the company was just getting started. I mean, we were coming from sort of an older company, and there's a whole long story there, but it's essentially Grand Studio was born out of 6 years ago. So as we started maturing a little bit more and more, I think we all started to think about, how can we do this better? Like, is the way that we're doing it actually the right way? And this was across all processes, but especially for evaluating designers, because that has such a big impact on just how projects are run, the business of it all, and also retention, right? We wanted to make sure that designers felt comfortable in how they were being evaluated.
Well, what's the risks of not doing it this way?
Yeah, I'd say the risks are that we're generally relying on gut feeling
Mhm.
most of the time. And I think that's a little bit of what was happening. I talk about like the previous form that we were using. I mean, there was a way of trying to systematize that, but it wasn't fully there. We also kind of wanted to go in like a quantitative kind of way as well.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that's sort of like what the path that led us there. So we wanted to get away from this like gut feeling approach of like, oh, you've been here, so many years. And, like, yeah, I do think that maybe you do deserve a promotion, or, maybe you need a little bit more experience. We want to get away from that and kind of provide more of a framework that the designers could follow. And then we could point to that and say, you need a little bit more, in craft, or you need a little bit more in like client communications, like things like that.
So are there a bunch of criteria that you recommend keeping in mind so that you as a designer who's going to be evaluated have those essentially a rubric for your performance in mind as you look ahead to whatever the year-end evaluation?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, we have a rubric, and we have what we call like traits, main traits that run from craft, quality, client, team. And then even within those, there's more attributes that break it down of like, what do we mean by craft, and quality? And even within that, then there's like different levels. And, depending on how much you've demonstrated that on projects, that's how you get evaluated.
Right. So, were you finding that those traits for designers and maybe other people like researchers, I'm not sure how specialized your people are, were you finding that there were existing sources that you could rely on, or whether coming from the design world or from maybe more general evaluative practices that might come out of HR, or were you just having to really make the stuff up from scratch?
A little bit of they were coming from the previous sort of initial method that we had for evaluating, those essentially were sort of like the general broad categories. And those were coming from really like what makes the business run, or like what we expect from our designers,
Hmm.
right? We want them to be great at craft. And it does break down into, like research and insights, visual systems, user experience, right? But also like we want them to create at a quality level. We want them to produce quality work. And they also have to be really good at client interactions, as well as, taking care of the team. So that was sort of like those broad categories of like, what do we want our designers to be, and how do we want to build up our designers? And also from this idea of we don't necessarily want specialized designers. So we don't want, someone that's like very deep into, XD or whatever. But we do want it sort of like a
Hmm.
generalized designer who can go into a project with a lot of ambiguity, which is something that we deal with a lot, and be able to use a lot of different skill sets to figure out that problem and produce something at the end.
So a big backdrop to this work then is some kind of both org structure and career architecture, right? So how specialized or not the roles are on your team are pretty important. The rubrics are going to vary, or the way the rubric is weighted. But also, you're going to see, I imagine, in terms of the career architecture, um, how many levels of advancement people needs to be addressed in terms of the way the evaluations are structured. So if I'm a junior IC and I want to move to becoming a senior IC, or then maybe a staff designer or manager or leader, these are these all sort of taken into account? I mean, you said Grand's a small organization, so you can't have too many layers, but I imagine there are some, and people have to have something to shoot for in their own careers.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so we developed those levels as well. So, across those different categories and the traits that I mentioned earlier, we broke those down into the different levels, which we have about 5 levels right now of, like, from a designer, which is like the first level, to all the way to like a director. What is expected of you across all those categories? What does it mean to be in that category? And, what are you supposed to be demonstrating
Mm-hmm.
and executing on. Yeah.
So now you put this together. So I'm really interested in a couple things about how you assembled all this. First of all, where does it live? Is it like a document with lots of and then how do you document the whole thing? Where does it live? Where do you store the evaluations? And then who created this? What was like the initiative ultimately? Was this like your baby? And did you work with other people? How did it like come together basically?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm the lucky person to be talking about this. But this was a whole team effort, including one of our chief directors at Grand Studio, Andrew Gold. He was the one that led this, and I helped him out. And one of the things in terms when you're talking about sort of laying this out, one of the first things that we did was just look at those broad categories and just start filling in, like, what do we think all these levels, like, what do you need to do? It was really me and him just filling that out and just going back and forth on what do we think a designer at each level needs to perform at. And we're talking about months of work here trying to define what those were. Um, and then it's at the end, where it is, the tool is actually the Google spreadsheet. Just because, the world runs on Excel and spreadsheets. But for us, that was the best tool that we could use, where we could customize it ourselves. We could share it to designers. For us as a small company, it didn't cost that much really, or at all, to house it there. Um, and then, we did look at other possible tools where we could kind of implement this, but just with the level of customization that we were doing in terms of like all the different levels that were required and how someone was going to be evaluated, Google Sheets was going to be the best place
Okay.
to
So
house all
the
that.
documentation is pretty straightforward, it sounds like, and
Mhm.
that's not surprising. I mean, that's really like the a secondary concern. Although I know, listen, we have a lot of design ops people listening in, and a lot of their focus is on tooling, and so it's good. It's a good question, but I think what's more important is once you have the structure in place, who does the evaluating? And that's probably a pretty big question, big enough that I think is probably a good chance for us to take a quick break and come back to it after that. So, everyone, you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm talking with Ignacio Martinez, and we're going to talk about, now that we have a nice big structure for handling designer evaluations, who does it and how does it play out? We'll talk about that after the break. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld talking with Ignacio Martinez of Grand Studios, speaking also, or a speaker at the Design Ops Summit coming up virtually September 23rd to 25th. We're talking about fair and effective designer evaluation. And before the break, we were talking about creating that infrastructure for doing those evaluations. What I'd love to talk about now, Ignacio, is who does the actual evaluation? Because I got to think it's potentially a really risky thing because every evaluator, every human, especially when they think about another human, has biases, whether it might be their own prejudices, they may not even realize it. They may be biased in favor of people unfairly. Oh, this is my team, and I go to bat for my team, so I give them better evaluations than maybe I should. So how do you address these risks? Are there other risks or other things that you try to consider when you hand over this process to people to start evaluating their people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are great concerns. I think what we've tried to do is take out as much of the bias as we can from this tool and try to make it as quantitative as possible. Obviously, that's you're not going to take everything out. But I'll talk a little bit about the process in terms of like giving feedback. For this tool, what we call the career path to evaluate designers, that will be used twice a year. So sort of at mid-year and then end of year for evaluations. And so what happens is throughout the year, an individual in a project is getting feedback from their teammates around them. This is anonymous. It's all based around people's individual goals that they've set for themselves. And these goals are mapped back to those big categories that I was talking about, where sort of like that tool or the career path, how I'll talk about it now, is structured. So we'll give each other sort of, glows and grows, positive, negatives based on, those goals and based on the project and our experience with them. And then that feedback gets taken to their own career manager, who synthesizes that information, provides feedback for them. And then they also, their career manager also uses that information to go into that tool and take a look at, where they've grown and where else they need to grow. In addition, there's also directors on the projects that will also take a look at that career path based on their experience and what they've seen from that individual designer in a project. or throughout like sort of like half the year,
Hmm.
and they'll go into the tool and also do their evaluations. And then at the end, there will be sort of a check from. We do have an HR person, so we do have checks from other sort of directors and our HR person who does the final check. And then at the end, if there is sort of a promotion pending, there is a sort of kind of gathering of all the directors to discuss, where this person is. Do they deserve to be a little bit more, do they deserve to be promoted, or, where are they in terms of their level? Are we confident that, in this next level, this designer is going to be comfortable and, ready to perform?
So let me understand the math. So first of all, how many people are employed at Grand Studio, roughly, if you can divulge that?
Yeah, roughly, it's about 20 people.
Okay, so 20 people. How many, for every person being evaluated, how many pairs of eyes are contributing to the evaluation?
Yeah, and it would depend on, how many teammates are on the project to provide that feedback, but typically maybe 3, 4 people are providing feedback.
Okay. So
And you
you're
got career manager, and then maybe like 2 or 3 more people are also checking that.
all right. So you're actually making sure there's quite a bit of, even with a small organization, that everyone is getting quite a bit of feedback.
Yes.
And that's really important. Um, and it's good to know that it happens twice a year, but that you're taking in information, it sounds like, if I understand, in a more like ongoing way. It's, yes, you have your two milestone evaluations biannually, but it sounds like at any moment, someone could submit, I guess, feedback or some sort of evaluative information on a colleague's performance.
Yeah, so there's definitely ways that we provide for just constant feedback. So we actually have a Slack channel where anyone can, post on there, something that someone did that was great. And then at the end of every project, we also have, those feedback sessions where we have, those glows and grows that people fill out based on, goals.
What are they
So we
called?
have a constant flow of feedback, I suppose.
Flows and grows?
Oh, glows and grows.
Close and grows.
Grows and grows. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, speaking of time, um, I'm wondering if, you've been doing this for a few years. Lots of things have happened in the last just a few years. Like when you created this system, the market might have been very different for attracting and retaining design talent than it is today. And I'm wondering if that has forced you to change the way you do things, change any aspects of your rubric, in that it's a different job market, and that the things that designers are being asked to do today may not be exactly what they were being asked to do a few years ago. There's a lot more, even in that short time, with the advent of, let's say, all the AI based functionality in Figma, let's say, that's had an impact on what people do on a day to day basis. So, are you seeing pressure to change your system, and how so?
Yeah, I'd say that we haven't had pressure to change the system from external forces like that. Um, because these categories, when we built them out, more they were broad, though, they go into the more specifics, but we wouldn't focus necessarily on, say, the types of tools I use, or are you, proficient in this or that. It's more about like the more like hard and soft skills that help you run a project and help you execute on a project. So I wouldn't say external forces have necessarily caused us to change. There have been things where we have had to change um, just internally, of like how we where we focus our efforts. So for example, one of the categories was sort of a studio. So what are you doing for the studio internally? Like, are you writing blogs? Are you going to events? Things like that. Um, that was sort of deprioritized and not really part of an evaluation, or something that counted towards someone's promotion.
Hmm.
Uh, because in the end, we were thinking about like what is it that is a priority for us as a business, and you know, actual projects with clients. That's what brings the business, and that's what designers are more focused on. So they never really had time to do any or much of the studio stuff, unless you were really going above and beyond and really like working over, overtime to try to complete that. But I think that that's the thing that we want to think about here of, when if I were to recommend anything for, any other sort of company like trying to build this out, it'd be like what is it that makes the business run? What kinds of designers um do you want to build to create positive impact, right? To those individuals, to the teams, to the business. I think that's ultimately what we're setting out to do with this tool.
So that's maybe a good place for us to wrap things. Big piece of advice there. That's a really helpful piece. Any other bits of advice that you think someone setting out to create or maybe revamp a designer evaluation approach should be keeping in mind?
Yeah, I think one of our key tenets is transparency. And throughout the process while we were developing this, we tried to keep our designers in the loop and show them, point blankly what we were doing so that they have visibility into that. And that extends not just in the creation of it, but also, once it's implemented, what are we doing? How are we doing it? I think that creates a lot of trust. And for us, it's helped a lot with retention for sure.
That's great advice. Fantastic. Uh, and now that we've pumped you for all this great advice, Ignacio, we're going to wrap up the podcast asking you for one more thing. And in the tradition of the Rosenfeld Review, I always like to ask our guests if they brought a gift for our listeners. What'd you bring us?
Yeah, I've been thinking about Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino. I think he's on my mind because he's coming out with a new album, a movie that accompanies that. And we just know him from a lot of great things like Atlanta, Community, and a lot of different things that he's done. And I think he's just an example of a modern Renaissance man who is executing at a great level and just doing what he loves and really expanding out.
He's amazing, and everyone should know about him. And yes, I love Atlanta. I hope it comes back. I think they've done 3 seasons. And I got to say, I think if you try to evaluate him with any kind of system, it would explode. He's just so full of so much different kinds of energy and ideas. So, well, thanks for sharing that and reminding us of the greatness of Gambino. And thank you for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to your talk at the Design Ops Summit in September. Good
Yeah,
to
thank you
good to
for having
talk with
me.
you today, Ignacio.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. Please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.